The order was to fall back immediately, but one soldier made a different decision. The order was clear, she says. This position had to be abandoned at once. By nightfall, everyone believed it was empty. They were mistaken. Slow burn opening NAR. The withdrawal proceeded surreptitiously. They left one by one. The men were leaving their posts, one by one, moving back under the cover of darkness, following orders that made sense at the time. The line had been stretched thin. Support was falling back. To hold this line any longer, however, would. Such actions would have served no purpose. As the last movement dwindled away, the area fell silent.
No voices. No signals.
But the sounds of far-off battles. Somewhere far beyond this position. From the outside. Underscore evaluations. There was no reason to believe anything was left there. No observable resistance. There is no return fire. No sign of life. This was confirmed later by enemy observers. The position had been abandoned. The retreat was complete. But what they couldn't see is one decision has been made in silence. One man remained. Not because he was ordered to stay. In the original. Not for the praise that might come his way. And not. He remained because, in that instance. This is a true story from the Second World War, and it highlights the heroism of a British, where a retreat is conducted according to the rules of war. Just as Anning. That is, one decision rendered them inanimate. Welcome to the Great War History. My name is Michael. If you like this type of video, subscribing to the channel will really help. In this case, we will deal with true events of history, told with less exaggeration than, and without making them legends. If you respect finely told war stories, think about subscribing to this channel. Leaving did not feel like the right choice. And if you feel that such episodes are worth remembering, and share this video with others. Now, let's get back to the moment. When the order to fall back had first been given. By the time the order was given, the Japanese offensive had already made. The situation on the ground had actually already started to change. This part of the front had not collapsed. But it was no longer stable. Days passed with the build-up of intense pressure. Not in massive attacks, but through constant probing. Artillery in the distance. And small movements which never really ceased. Men slept for short intervals. The supplies came late, if they even came. Messages often had to be repeated more than once before they could be understood. The position itself was no longer optimum. What had been a united defensive line was broken, and with it, was now positioned on both sides. Adjacent units had already been withdrawn, allowing for leaving gaps that maps did not always reflect accurately. From the men who are holding this ground. It did not feel like a dramatic moment. This is what it felt like to be. They had been around long enough to know. When a position was about to start losing its value, there were fewer reasons to stay. And more reasons to prepare for movement. Command also saw the same thing. But in a broader context. Remaining in this position anymore would not impede the enemy significantly. It could only result in the severance of the unit. Once the next push came. And when that occurred, there would be no clean exit. There was minimal ground for hiding while withdrawing under attack. If the enemy advanced quickly, the British officers. This withdrawal would descend into chaos. This was not a question of courage. It was a matter of timing. Pull back too early. And grounds are unnecessarily lost. Pull back too late. And males are lost in it. From a tactical viewpoint. But the balance had already shifted.
La decisión de retirarse.
It was not dramatic. And it was not controversial. It was the type of decision. The story of how the antibodies were obtained from the horse rarely. But this is an ongoing occurrence during a war. Silence. Calculated. And final. Finally, when the order came through. It was brief. Fall back immediately. Don't put off until. Do not try to hold. Answering this question involves no explanations. None were required. The men knew exactly what it meant. They had prepared for times such as this. Not in grand simulations, but by repetition. Take just what you can carry by hand. This means Demolish everything that could possibly be used by the enemy. Nothing is left as if the position was never filled. There was no panic. Every action was purposeful. Weapons were checked. There was redistribution of equipment. Routes were confirmed quietly, one last time. Some men looked at the ground one last time. They had defended for days, sometimes weeks. Not out of attachment, but sheer habit. Every soldier knows that once a position is abandoned, it must never again be. It may never be seen again. The withdrawal started under the cover of poor visibility. Small groups moved first, James K. spacing themselves carefully, avoiding unnecessary noise. The objective was not speed. It was invisibility. As the sections left the area, the position grew quieter, Dima. Footsteps faded. Voices were lost. Even the slightest trace of activity disappeared. This was exactly what was left. Silence. From the outside, the bodies of the men had been and there had been a shift in the front, once again. That was the way this was supposed to finish. However, war rarely honors the assumptions. And not all decisions are preceded by an order. The decision was not taken loudly. There was no dramatic moment, Wright explained in. No final glance, no final words. It happened covertly. Within the short space between receiving an order and the time when it has to, and acting upon it. As the withdrawal progressed, one soldier remained motionless. He knew what the order was. There was no confusion about what was expected. Every one of the others was leaving. And for good reason. But standing there, Garner, watching the position empty, something did not feel right. It was not bravery. And it was no defiance. It was familiarity. He knew the ground. He understood how the position looked from a distance. He knew how easily it might be misunderstood. The enemy would think that the retreat meant weakness. They would demand silence. They could expect no resistance. And that assumption, he believed, could be used. The intention was never to be left behind. There would be no reinforcement, no support, no recognition if it worked, and no rescue if it failed. He would be alone, in limited supply, and only what he could carry. Going out meant safety. Remaining was unsettled. He chose uncertainty, not because he thought it would change the war, but because he is a poet, he expressed. But because he believed that might possibly delay the next move. Even briefly. And sometimes, a few minutes is all that matters. As the last member of his unit disappeared into the darkness, the decision became finalized. There was no turning back, she said. The silence came first.
No saben.
But gradually, footsteps dwindled. Metal stopped flowing. Even the slightest noises associated with movement had ceased. What was left was the position itself, because without the person, they, unaffected, but empty. For the first time since their arrival in Moscow, the soldier was completely alone. Without conversation, time starts to stretch. All sounds are clearer now. Every pause seems longer. He adjusted the limited equipment that he had maintained, looked around at his environment, then waited. We had no clear strategy other than this. It was crucial to remain hidden. Any early indication of movement would prove the enemy's expectations. The position had to appear abandoned, he said. Convincingly so. From where he was, visibility was limited. That proved advantageous for him. Hours went by uneventfully. In the distance, the war proceeded just as it had before, occasionally flickering. Monotonous sounds, transmitted by the wind. But just around nothing moved. This was the most dangerous phase. Not action, but anticipation. Since, if the enemy advanced confidently, they would not move cautiously. They would not expect any kind of resistance. And that confidence, once established, is difficult to undo. As the night wore on, the soldier held his position, conserving energy, listening carefully. He was no longer part of a unit, no longer part of a line. He was merely an entity that was not supposed to exist. And soon, which would make their presence apparent. From the enemy's perspective, the situation seemed to be settled. The withdrawal was noticed. There was no movement. There was no indication of activity at the position. Silence can be much louder than words in war. The reports were ascended up the chain of command. Each one is confirming the same hypothesis. The position had been abandoned. There was no reason to think otherwise. No defensive fire.
No patrols. No apparent preparation.
Confidence came to replace caution. The small enemy troops moved first, not anticipating any kind of resistance, but merely to confirm what they already believed. They acted openly. Intention without urgency. This is not an assault. It was merely a formality. From where the soldier waited, these movements could scarcely be seen. However, these were enough. He could tell by the spacing. According to the posture. Through the way they navigated the land. They were not expecting any contact. That was the point of the whole thing. Every advance made by the enemy strengthened their belief in this assumption. And once an assumption becomes comfortable, and becomes dangerous, the longer the silence that ensued, the more confident the advance became. Part 6. The turning point. The moment did not come suddenly. There was no signal. No countdown. It came when the enemy moved forward just far enough in believing that they were safe. This marked the point of no return. The soldier waited longer than his instincts presumed. Nor because he hesitated, but more for its timing than its action. When finally he made a move, it was controlled. Careful, accurate, the impact was instantaneous. Confusion spread faster than fear. Orders were shouted. Nothing moved. What had been a confident advance became instead a tentative. Uncertain became uncertain in seconds. The enemy did not know the number of people left behind. They didn't know what they had walked into. It is in the midst of all this momentum was lost. What mattered was not the extent of the resistance, but the doubt it created. The premise of an empty position dissolved. And with it, the certainty that had driven the advance. The objective after the first shock, the stocks, but then the situation changed again. The enemy slowed. Advanced cautiously. Paused more frequently. What should have been a mere confirmation proceeding became an ordeal when a group had become a challenge that required a solution. For the soldier, the pressure increased. There was no illusion anymore. He had been seen. The position was no longer ignored. Every move had to be calculated. Every sound considered. He remained alone. There shall be no reprieve. Reinforcement not provided, no signal to fall back on. Time became the objective. No victory. Not territory. Time. Each minute the enemy hesitated was a minute gained elsewhere. Every delay required a re-evaluation. Each stop changed their pace. Under normal conditions, this position would not have held. But war is an affair of moments which are by no means normal. Finally, the situation resolved itself, not through escalation, yet with caution. The enemy had to change their plans. The position was considered to be occupied. Resources were realigned. And that was enough. The soldier did not have to win. All he had to change was what the enemy thought. And for a brief, critical period, he did just that. Conclusion. Why this moment mattered. Events that happened here had nothing to do with the war. It neither changed the boundaries nor, nevertheless, it did not show up as an important turning point in official documents. However, it counted. It was important because it made the enemy pause. Because it upset a plan that was based on certainty. And because it recalled Sikh traditions. It usually goes unnoticed or unrecorded. On this channel, we focus on those moments, /Jrio where decisions matter more than recognition, and silence is more important than spectacle. If you are interested in hearing more war experiences in the style of the above story, please subscribe to this channel. And if you think that such moments must be remembered, share this video with others. Thank you for watching.